Joining me on the podcast today is Mac Hereford, the former Alabama receiver and Vanderbilt receiver. Mac, I got to ask you, I had Christian Jones on the podcast not too long ago. Man, give me your 2 cents on Alabama this year. What is the deal?
I think it's a lot of things. One, shout out to Christian Jones. Great guy. Love that you had him on. But yeah, let's get into it. Alabama this year, obviously we have 2 losses. We've had 2 more other games that could have been losses as well. It's frustrating as a former player to watch it because, I feel like I'm a lot of times still part of the team. But I think it all comes down to like the standard. I know a lot of guys, older guys, alumni have all been talking about it, that it has a lot to do with this Alabama standard. Like, what does that actually mean? Because the thing is, we have talent. We're going to have talent like most every year, especially for now. The dynasty is definitely not over. But it's hard to tell, without being in the locker room. It's hard to say exactly what the issue is or the problem is. But there's way too many penalties, which that points to like discipline issues. I don't know if that comes on the coaches or if that comes on the players. But that's a huge issue. Penalties in general. We've never had teams with like this many penalties under the Saban era, or that I know of. And just seems like the guys, at times are not doing their job. And like that was the main thing that was stressed when I was at Alabama. It's like, you got to do your job, You can't,
Right.
You don't celebrate like this or don't do this and that. Like, guys were just balled in. And again, it's hard to tell without being in the locker room, but there seems to be a lack of that this year. Whether it's on the coaching side or the player side, it takes one person, whether it's a player or coach, to change the whole, program. So if one person's not doing their job, it could be affecting the whole thing. But they've showed some good signs of, playing to that standard and ability to play to that standard. But overall, again, I just think there's a lack of discipline there, and something needs to change in that building.
Christian touched on the lack of discipline, and he thinks that it may be something to do with the transfer portal and guys not really buying into the process. What do you think about that?
It's a really good point that he brought up. I think that the whole thing with the transferring process and, allowing players just to go from one place to the next, as easy as just to snap their fingers does change things a lot, because you got to think like, if you're there and you're like, dang, I don't really like it here. It's hard to leave. I mean, if you leave, then you're sitting out a year, whatnot. There's certain teams you can go to. Now it's just like, oh, I don't like it here. Like, so-and-so wants me, I'm going to get more NIL money and go play over there. Like,
Almost like a big free agency now.
yes. And that's the thing. And I would think, and I think I do believe in Coach Saban to minimize that. Because that's what it's about, is like, guys, every year we had 5 stars. Like we had, one year we had running backs. We had Damian, Najee, Josh Jacobs when I was playing. And those guys are all incredible players, but Josh Jacobs could have easily played anywhere else, and he wasn't the starter, but he just wanted to be at Bama and he's invested in the process. But now it's like, okay, if he had that option, who knows what he would have done? Who knows what other guys would have done? And so it kind of like hurts the way things have worked in the past, because there's not that pressure. And it makes it easier just to, say, I don't like it here. Like, let me leave.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of somebody who did the complete opposite of that and bought into the process is Mac Jones. Man, he waited his turn and now he's, NFL quarterback and all that stuff. Was that part of your decision to come to Alabama? Was you wanted to go against 5-star guys and make yourself better in practice every day?
Yeah, it's one of there's a lot of reasons. I could go on and on about the reasons I went to the University of Alabama, but I think one of the big ones, like you just mentioned, is the fact that at the end of the day, like, my goal is, faithful person is to be the best I can be, like what I want, the things I'm going to do. So if I'm going to be the best football player I can be, the best place to do that is the University of Alabama. And that was my thought process. Like, okay, I'm going to get to go against not only the best defensive backs in the country and safeties, but I'm going to get to work along the best wide receivers as well. So that was a huge factor for me when I decided to go to Alabama. I was like, yeah, like if I want to be the best, I've got to be with the best, no matter if I'm going to get playing time or not. Like, at the end of the day, my goal is to be the best receiver, not to play as much, not to go to the, whatever it is. I want to be the best football player I can be. And Alabama was the place to do that.
How much of a difference was that when you went to Vanderbilt?
It was a pretty big difference. So I guess when I played for 4 years at Alabama, and I was like, look, absolutely love it here, graduated, played 4 years. And then it was like, I was in that point where like, I put my time in. I want more opportunities. I got to start in a spring game. Like, I can play somewhere else was the thought process I had. And, I can do that. So let me go. I've like had the 4 years with the team, did my job, did my part. Now it's time for me to move on. Like so entered in the transfer portal. And then Vanderbilt was one of the first teams to reach out to me. They had a wide receiver there, Moorhead. Forgetting his first name, which is really bad. I think he's a coach for the Eagles now. Maybe their wide receiver coach, but awesome guy. I visited Vandy, spoke to me for like 2 hours. No coaches really sat down and like kind of gone through where they see me playing a role in the offense. Showed me exactly where I was going to play, what the deal was. He ended up leaving like 2 weeks before I was going to decide to go there.
No.
But yeah, with Vandy, it was okay. I've gotten this whole side of the football thing. I've learned from Coach Saban, one of the best coaches in the country. Alabama's got a great school too. People sleep on Alabama a lot for education. Like I learned a lot in those classes. But when I got an opportunity to go play at Vanderbilt, one of the top academic schools in the nation and one of the top in the South, it was like, okay, I've learned all of this and gotten all this knowledge, especially on the football side. Learned a ton from Coach Saban. I could learn even more from him if I wanted to, but got all that knowledge. Okay, here's the school offering me a good opportunity, with the best academics. Let me get both sides of it. And that was one of the reasons I made my decision to go to Vandy.
Man, you went into enemy lines on both Alabama and Vandy when you rushed the field that night that Tennessee beat Alabama. What was that night like?
Oh no! So the night that Tennessee beat Alabama, I started out on the Bama side, like on the Bama sideline, and then I was in the stands. But for Tennessee, Florida is the one that I rushed the field.
Gotcha.
So it was both not related to Alabama or Vandy, but I was with a buddy of mine, Theo Vaughn, and then Caleb Pressley. They invited me to the game. It was just a big game to go. To go to. It was fun. And it was a great weekend, a great experience. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Is Theo Vaughn and Caleb Pressley and Portnoy and Will Compton, are all those Barstool guys, are they really as funny in person as they are in videos?
Yeah, they're hysterical. I would say, especially when we talk about Theo and Caleb, like Caleb's hysterical. Theo, though, is just, you cannot stop laughing. I mean, it's cool being a friend of his because he's a great guy. Like he's one of the best guys I've ever met. Has some great things to say about life. He's done a lot of things really cool, treats people really well, but like, he's just hysterical. Like I don't know, like he doesn't try to be funny, anything like that. He's just very good at describing things and just, being himself, and it just cracks me up. So they all are, especially just Caleb and Theo for sure, are just as funny as you see them online.
Get Theo on there with Joey Diaz or Brendan Schaub, dude. You'll be laughing for an hour straight. King it and sting
100%.
it.
100%.
Man, let me ask you about that viral video clip you had that went on ESPN. You started out, it looked like you were up in DC in front of one of the monuments, which was pretty cool. So you start out catching it with 5 hands all the way down to 1. How many takes did that take? Did you jam every finger in your hand trying to do that?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little background on the whole thing. So I basically was with the very first time I did it. I saw someone, so a lot of my concept on TikTok, social media, whatever, is like, okay, here's an idea. Someone's doing it. If someone has an idea, it's like, how can I make that idea a little bit better? How can I improve it or make it harder? So I saw a guy doing like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever, had someone filming it for him. So I'm like, okay, let me make this a little bit harder. I'm going to film this myself and also catch the ball at the same time. So I'm like looking through the camera and like putting my hand in a certain area. And so I got Vanderbilt quarterback Ken Seals was the very first person to do it with me. I was like, yo, Ken, like, let's go out here. Let's do this. So we go to this park, and 5, easy, 4, easy. He throws a tight spiral. So it made it really, it's like 3 was, pretty easy. I was like, dang, this is cool. And then 2 was pretty hard. It took me a couple of tries. And then the 1 was like, it was super, super hard. Cause the way you have to do it is you have to kind of like, I catch it on the side. So you got to get a loftier pass and you got to glide it down in the same idea or concept of like, if you're doing like parkour, I've never done parkour, but you try to like, people will roll when they hit the ground. Yeah. People roll when they hit the ground to try to like increase that like or like lessen the impact. So in the same way I'm doing that, I'm gliding the ball down, like lowering the speed of the ball, everything, and then I got to balance it. And so there's a couple of times when I haven't completely been able to do it, but most every time I can. And yeah, I mean, I haven't had a jam finger, but a lot of my friends will they're like, yeah, I went out, I thought I could do it. And like, how do you do this thing? 1, and then 2, like I've jammed every single one of my fingers. I don't know. I guess I really focus on my hands and my coordination. in college and like really helped me. And then just a lot of focus and just like I do it so much now, it just comes like natural. Like people are like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or whatever. So
if I threw a football at you right now, you could catch it with one finger. How many takes would it take?
that would take me. It just depends. One is it depends on how good of a spiral
I
you're
I got
throwing.
a tight spiral. Former quarterback, high school quarterback up here.
I know. I love that jersey. That's sick. Yeah, it depends. It depends how I'm feeling. Depends on the weather. One time I tried to do it with my buddy Jordan Tamu, and it was super, super cold outside, and it took like that was like, where I was like worried about my fingers getting jammed and stuff. But other times, like with Paul Tyson, former Alabama quarterback, current Arizona State quarterback, it took me like 3 tries, and I was like, "Holy cow!" Like, and I did it with no gloves. I was like, "Wait, I just did that," you know?
Is it easier
Um,
without gloves or with gloves?
the whole process is definitely easier with gloves. But I can do it without gloves. People all the time are like, do it without gloves. I'm like, I've done it multiple times without gloves,
That's
but
just showing off at that point.
100%.
Man, let me ask you, since you just mentioned your buddy Jordan Talmo, have you ever, because I know he plays for the Bandits, USFL quarterback. Did you ever think about going USFL, CFL, Arena Football League, something like that?
Yeah, definitely. So when I graduated, I actually at the end of my career, my college career, had a torn labrum and then a hamstring injury, torn labrum in my hip. So I took a little bit of time off and then I started like practicing again. And there's a guy named Jeremy Holt here in Nashville who's like a top trainer. Trains a bunch of NFL guys. He's awesome. So I started working with him a little bit, being around all these guys who are playing in the league, staying in shape. And I love the sport of football. And so it was definitely my goal and still kind of like lingers around a little bit that I want to play at the next level. So definitely thought about doing USFL, XFL, CFL, even considered it, but I just love the United States too much to really want to go outside of it. But yeah, definitely consider doing those kind of things. And, it's awesome to see my friends like Jordan, balling out, and hopefully we'll see him again next season, USFL or XFL, which will be fun.
So after we kind of touched on it briefly, but after Bama, you went and did your 5th year at Vanderbilt, and you said that coach that recruited you left before you got there. What was the deciding factor that, hey, I'm going to stick with Vanderbilt?
I guess it was a lot of different things, but it was tough because it was during COVID. So we were literally, most recruiting processes would be like, all right, let me take a couple of visits here, let me go here. I didn't have the luxury of doing that because it was like lockdown and stuff. Like I'm talking to coaches, they're still trying to coaches are trying to figure out what they're doing for next season.
So
Lesson
this is during
loans.
COVID.
Yes. So the process of like the transfer process was all during COVID. So there's so much unknown. Coaches I would probably be talking to a lot more schools if it wasn't for the fact that like a lot of schools were trying to figure out what's going on. Like, are we going to even have a football program next year?
Mm-hmm.
Are we like, how are we going to operate? Coaches were going through that whole process. And then so these transfers, one including myself, it was a very difficult time because you're left in the air. It's like no one on this side of like the coaches and everything is really like focusing mainly on transfers or getting those guys because they're trying to figure out literally what's going on right now. They have guys transferring and you have COVID. And
Right.
then on the other side, you have these players who are at schools. And a lot of me was like, dang, I should have just stayed at Alabama because of like, it was very frustrating. Like training wise, like I was like, it was hard to find somewhere to train even during that time. Like I remember quarterback Duck Hodges, and I got kicked out of a field because we were jumping fences during COVID because they closed the fields down. And we're like, we just got to get that work in. We told one of the cops, we're like, we just got to get that work in. And he was like, sorry, like you can't do it here. All that to say, he left, and I was like, dang, like that really put a big, kind of question mark on everything, just because of my relationship with him, because I didn't know this new coach coming in. But at the end of the day, it was like I visited before COVID, had a great time. I had a cousin there who was playing college tennis at Belmont. My parents went to Vandy for grad school and law school. Knew it was an unbelievable school. I got in to the marketing, the master's of marketing program. And it's like, okay, if I can get into this program, set myself up for life, and that kind of aspect. My parents went there. Nashville's a booming city, a great city to be in. And they want me to come play and give me an opportunity. Like, and Coach Mason was a huge factor too, as well. Very at the end of the whole thing, like FaceTiming me when I was on the golf course or something, or like calling me. He's super personable, and he's a really good Christian man. And so getting to like know him and be like, okay, like he really wants me there. That felt good, and that overall helped me make my decision.
Yeah, man, Nashville's a good time. We won't get into it, but we've Snapchatted about it, man. It's a lot of fun for sure. Get you in trouble if you don't watch out. Um,
100%.
Max, so to wrap this up, give me some things that you learned during your time at Alabama that have helped you just in your everyday life as a man.
Yeah, again, when we talk about Alabama or things learned from Coach Saban, it's like go on, and I'll always be like, dang, I forgot to say this, forgot to do that. But I'll just give you a couple of things. One that I think is definitely very helpful is the fact that, like, I can't remember the exact like wording, but it's something like, don't let your feelings justify your actions, or don't let your feelings, like, you know, yeah, I guess that's it. Don't let your feelings justify your actions. What that means is, like, okay, if I don't feel good today, but I've got to get up and do something. Like, and in football, it was like, say I wasn't feeling great, like, or something was going on bad at home. I've got to come out there, and for my teammates and for my team, I've got to perform my best, regardless of what else is going on. And so I love that, because in life, there's days where, like, I'm like, dang, I'm tired, but I made a commitment to go do this. And so I've got to go do it, regardless of what my body feels like or how I feel. I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to do it the best of my ability. That was one thing I think is huge. Another thing is the quote that Coach Saban always says. He says, you can either live with the pain of discipline or the pain of disappointment. Like, which one are you gonna do? And I think that's big, because with everything in life, you have to be disciplined to be able to get things done. Got to be able to, the smallest things you require discipline. And if you don't do those things, then you're going to have disappointment. That's just how it works. Without discipline, you're going to have disappointment. So that was a cool thing. And then just the whole idea of the process, there's like the biggest thing that Alabama or Coach Saban, preached a lot of the time is like, there's this process. And I invested in that process before I was even at Alabama, before I even heard Coach Saban say it. But it's essentially like, everyone wants to have goals. Everyone wants to have dreams. You need to come up with that goal, that thing you want. And then you got to decide, how am I going to get there? And you got to make those steps. And then you got to follow that plan, follow that process, and stick to it, through the whole time. And if you focus on that process and getting better and becoming the best you can be, then, like, these other things are going to work out. But the process requires every little detail, every little thing. Like, it involves discipline, and stuff like that. So those are a couple of things I learned from Alabama. Again, learned a ton, but those are some that a few have definitely resonated with me recently in life. And just literally, like, got to put the work in. At the end of the day, the work's going to show, and if you don't, it's going to get you when it gets you, is what Coach Saban says.
I know another one of his big ones was be where your feet are. I know that was one I heard a lot being a manager up there. Man, give me your Iron Bowl prediction real quick.
Whew. Let me think here. Okay. We got the Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa. Auburn's been looking a little bit better. They got Cadillac Williams coaching.
Yep.
He's got that. He's got a lot of stuff going on. Bama has not been looking great. They did not have a great, start, especially a great start against Austin Peay. It was not great at all.
I think I'd go 27-17 Alabama.
27-17 Alabama. Okay, let me.
That might be a little too close.
I'm gonna go 35-10 Alabama.
35-10. All right, you heard it here first. You saw him on the field in an Alabama uniform, Vanderbilt uniform. I'm sure you've seen him on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere else. Mac, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Skylar, I really appreciate it, man. It was an honor and blessed, and I appreciate you having me on. This is great.